when we design our neighborhoods right, and that is active travel, but all the other things that come with it, our well-being, our sense of community, our support networks is just so much stronger.
Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 7 of the Squeaky Wheel podcast. We speak with leading influencers about policy, industry and more across cycling, walking and all other forms of human-scaled mobility. My name is Phil Latz and I've been squeaking about various causes for over 40 years.
And I'm Sarah Stace, Director at Vivendi Cities, joining today from Gadigal Land in Sydney. I bring 30 years experience from all levels of government and the private and not-for-profit sectors. Before we introduce this month's guest, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could hit the follow button on your podcast platform to keep the algorithm happy and help us keep growing. Even better, if you could leave us a review, we'd love your support.
Phil, one of the events that I look forward to every year is the Transport Professionals Association Conference. It's hosted in a different city each year, and this year it's Brisbane's turn. From the 8th to the 11th of September, transport professionals from around the country will debate the theme, Shaping the Future, Moving the Now, examining how we plan, move and connect, while also enabling thriving, inclusive and sustainable communities. And what I love most about this conference, apart from networking with our peers, of course, are the keynote speakers who are always so inspiring.
I couldn't agree more, Sarah. I've been lucky enough to go to a few of these conferences in the past, and this year delegates will be hearing from close to 100 speakers, including influential leaders such as Hill Pangalosa from 880 Cities, Teresa Wells from GHD New Zealand, Sally Stannard, the Director General of the Queensland Department of Transport and Main Roads, and Professor Amelia Thorpe from the University of New South Wales. And of course, most importantly, they'll be hearing from my co-host Sarah and our podcast promotions manager Mark Ames. And I'll also be attending and love to say hi to anyone who's there.
Yes, I will be running a workshop, Phil, on what to do when good transport ideas get stuck, where I'll present on the 7 systems that hold up good transport decisions and how to address them. And this year, the conference has a range of practical, hands-on workshops so you can participate in a lively learning environment to address real-world problems and solutions. From policy and planning to delivery and operations and across every career stage, the TPA National Transport Conference is the annual event where transport professionals connect, challenge each other's ideas and shape the future of our cities and regions. So don't miss out. Registrations are now open at transportprofessionals.com.au. That's transportprofessionals.com.au.
Today, we'll be speaking with Roxanne De Beaux. Despite having the most French-sounding name imaginable, Roxanne says she doesn't speak French. She was born in Australia, where she lived up until about 2016 when she moved to the UK. After initially completing a degree in management in Perth, Western Australia, Roxanne entered the corporate world and excelled as a management consultant and product developer. But clearly, Roxanne was not cut out to climb the corporate ladder and left a year of travel and adventure, mainly in South America, before settling in the UK. There, she was soon immersed in cycling, volunteering, and working for multiple organisations simultaneously. Roxanne became best known as the CEO of the Cambridge Cycle Campaign, better known as Camcycle. During her 8 years at the helm, she massively grew Camcycle and became well known across the UK. She also became the co-host of the Active Travel Café, which we'll hear about soon, and a board trustee of Cycling UK. At the time of this recording, Roxanne was surrounded by packing boxes, preparing to take up an exciting senior government active transport role back in her hometown of Perth, Western Australia.
Roxanne De Beaux, welcome to the Squeaky Wheel podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Hopefully you still will be by the end. We'll see. So both your educational and career record have high achiever stamped all over them. Would it be fair to describe you as someone with a driven personality?
Absolutely. If we can use words like driven on a cycling and active travel podcast, I definitely have a driven personality.
I believe you're currently between roles and places of residence, but back when you were living in Cambridge at your regular place of abode, if you stepped out of your house, what scene would you have seen on the street?
Oh, I am still in my house. I'm currently surrounded by boxes, so I may get emotional when I describe this scene because where I live, so carefully chosen, I think is such a strong reflection of my values and what it is that we work for. So, firstly, I walk out of my house and I've got my bike parking in my front garden. So, I've got 4 Sheffield stands. So, all my friends, when they come to visit, have somewhere to park. And I have got a very calm street because of the way our particular neighborhood is laid out. So no through traffic for cars, but through traffic for people walking and cycling. So I get to see all sorts of bikes, cargo bikes and trailers and kids cycling around up and down my street. And then across the road, I have a community garden. And that community garden, having that little bit of public space where my neighbors and I can come together. We grow vegetables, we grow flowers, we've done some biodiversity work for bees, bugs, squirrels, all sorts. But that is how I've been able to get to know all of my neighbours. So the problem is if you come and visit me and we walk out the front of the house, it takes half an hour just to get to the bike path along the river because you've got to stop and chat to all your neighbours that you know. And that's something so central to why I do this work, because when we design our neighbourhoods right, and that is active travel, but all the other things that come with it, our well-being, our sense of community, our support networks is just so much stronger. And that is why it's so hard for me to leave, because I do believe that those factors in my neighbourhood have created a place that I just absolutely love living, and I will find it hard to go.
That sounds like an amazing place to live, Roxanne. I think a lot of people will be very jealous of that. Hopefully, you get that in your new location in Perth when you get there. I was going to ask you about this idea of the Active Travel Café. I've never heard of that. So, can you describe what that is and your involvement?
Sure. It started out as ideas with beers, and it was a few people, and I'm sure many folks listening would have heard of Brian Deegan. He is a living legend here in the UK. And it was Brian and some other colleagues who used to catch up in a pub once a week and talk about what was going on with work, help each other out. And then COVID hit and they went online. And suddenly that meant people all over the country could attend. And I guess people were looking for something, especially in those times when it could feel quite isolated. And so many people started joining. Well, I can't really call it Ideas with Beers anymore. So it became Active Travel Cafe. And Brian needed more people to come in and help, especially when he started working for Active Travel England. And so I was one of those folks that got involved. Now, what is Active Travel Cafe? It is once a week on a Tuesday afternoon after work. Anyone can jump on and join from the active travel industry, be that campaigners, transport planners, engineers, government, councillors, volunteers, paid employment. Anyone's welcome. We do a quick news round and then we have a different presentation. And I cannot believe it, but we have been consistently getting 60 to 100 people every week, sometimes more than 100 every week since the first months of COVID. It's still going. It's a great group of volunteers who facilitate that. We rotate it around. Sadly, I will need to let that go because the time difference makes it really difficult to stay involved from Western Australia. I do need to focus on my Australian colleagues now. So yeah, it's been a great way of knowledge sharing and giving people that support network and building that network. That's so important. And when you see each other in real life, oh, you don't have a square around your head. Oh, is that what you look like? Oh, let's have a chat. And oh, I know who to message or who to reach out to for help on something. And there is an amazing archive on the website available to anyone all around the world. All of those sessions have been recorded, filmed, and put online. So go and take a look. Active Travel Cafe.
That sounds like an incredible resource. And I'm really impressed at how many people get involved. Are you aware of any other countries that have one? And when would you recommend it?
I am not specifically aware. I would definitely recommend it. I think, yeah, you need the people who are available to do the facilitating. And yes, you definitely need to be quite consistent to keep people coming. And it's really important that there's that community building aspect to it. So sometimes the chat is almost too active alongside the speaker. We're like, let's just calm the chat down for a while and focus on the speaker. So that community aspect is so important. But I think conferences are great, but especially in a country like Australia, that's hard to do. You've got to travel some quite long distances. It costs a lot of money. It's really not possible for a lot of people to attend the conference. So having something regularly online that people can dip in and out of, I think is a really good way to build the skills and the knowledge in the industry, but also give people that community of support.
It sounds like something we need to keep in mind, Phil, for Australia.
Indeed, not just Australia, but I can think of a lot of countries in the world. I've been reading the annual report of Cycling UK, as you do, and I've learnt that it's the 147 years old, probably the oldest cycling advocacy organisation in the world, and it's also quite large, £12 million annual income. Why did you decide to join the board of Cycling UK?
Yes, I was invited to or encouraged to. That certainly helps. And I think that's something really important in the charity sector that we keep in mind is don't just wait for people to volunteer. Sometimes they do need an approach and a bit of encouragement. So that had been mentioned a few times, but why at that time for me, I felt that I was ready to be valuable to the board and to the organisation based on my experience with Camcycle. And I wanted to give back because Cycling UK had certainly been of immense support to me and to Camcycle over the years. So I felt that thank you for what they had given. How can I give something back to them? Also, it was important to me that there was representation on that board from the campaigning perspective. And of course, plenty of campaigners have been on the board of Cycling UK over the years, but I did feel there was a somewhat unique perspective from my experience with Camcycle that I could offer as well. But I do think that often CEO of a campaigning organization, people think, oh, she'll come and bring the campaigning knowledge, but actually so much of my work has been on the finance, the fundraising, the technology, the HR, the nuts and bolts of running an organization. That was quite useful to apply to Cycling UK as well. And of course, personally for me, it's been a wonderful experience. I have learned so much. I have really enjoyed my time on the board. When I did join, I did not know that I would be moving to Australia. Sadly, I am ending my time there earlier than I had expected, and I wish I could have done a few more years to really round out that contribution. But my colleagues on the board and in the organisation have been very supportive. I think as well, Cycling UK has been through quite a lot of change. I think I'm not sure how closely you follow the organisation, but here in the UK, it's very obvious the branding, the look of the organisation is very different. The organisation has to adapt to change to many of the changes in the political and external environment, what's happening with funding, how do you need to shape the organisation to match that. But I feel that there is a great future ahead for Cycling UK. I'm really pleased with where the organisation is going as a result of all that change. For any large advocacy group in cycling, like Cycling UK or any other national body, there's always things to balance, like your work on behaviour change, your campaigning work. If you're campaigning too strongly, is that going to upset someone in the government who might be funding your behaviour change program? How much do you get involved on the detailed level in local areas versus what's on your inside to track campaigning towards the government? Do you want national policy to change, or do you want to support your campaigners doing their grassroots campaigning at local authority level? And of course, it would be great to do all of that, but then you might end up with quite an unwieldy, unfocused organisation. I think the big challenge for any organisation like Cycling UK at the moment is, given how much change there is, how much complexity there is, how little funding there is, how do you really find those most opportune areas of change and focus on them?
Roxy, you devoted more than a decade to running and building Camcycle. When you joined in 2015, you were the sole employee, I understand, and you grew this to a team of 7 people by 2024. That's a really big cycling advocacy organisation for a population of only about 180,000 people in that greater urban area. How did you achieve such a high rate of growth?
I think I firstly have to say it wasn't me. It was our organisation. And yes, I was their first ever permanent full-time employee, but I absolutely joined a really well-run, well-resourced organization. The volunteers who had worked on Camcycle for 20 years before I joined, and so many are still involved. They've been there from day one. And I've even got one of our very first members from that first meeting is on the board right now. Camcycle now, an incredible group of most really kind volunteers is what we had to start with. And I guess just having that person to come in and help coordinate and facilitate and nudge things along certainly helps. And of course, then luckily that you're also in a city like Cambridge funding. There was funding to help get that going, to get the first employee, and then having the first employee, you can do a bit more fundraising, then you can get the second one. And I'm just so delighted that my first hire, our second employee, Anna, is now the CEO of Camcycle, and she's doing a phenomenal job. And we're already seeing new team members being added. I just met them yesterday or the day before at our national conference. So Anna was absolutely instrumental in that change and growth of Camcycle, and she's now the CEO as well. So lucky person, right place, right time. If I was going to go and say, here's what I personally think, I do think that there is, as we said, that driven personality, being a builder, and sometimes maybe to my own detriment, but it's hard to just see a thing that needs fixing and not try and fix it. It's hard to see an opportunity and not try and grow it. And my background in management consulting and strategy, I think, really helped to put structures and strategies and things in place that we could follow through. And perhaps I'm just so passionate about it. It's not a normal job. It's been a vocation. It's something that you are so passionate about. And how lucky. I know how many people do this voluntarily because they're so passionate, and I get to get paid for it. Yeah, I think just really this amazing community and the right place in the right time.
That sounds amazing. And anybody who works in advocacy who's listening to this podcast is going to have in their mind, because they always struggle with revenue, they're going to be wondering, where does Camcycle get its funding and how do you ensure that's sustainable over time?
Yes, membership, of course. Really, the starting point for Camcycle was a really solid membership base. And that used to be 100% of Camcycle's funding. That's now down to being maybe 10% of our funding. But many of our members are also donors. And your membership base is really important because that's where you start to build that relationship with people. You find out who may be able to support you in larger amounts. So really, if I look at the trajectory of where funding came from, start with membership, then a donation, that means we got the first employee. The first employee can start ramping up the fundraising work, particularly drawing on that membership base, and also do grant applications. Although the grant landscape is getting harder and harder now. And actually, as Camcycle grew, we grew out of a lot of funds that we may have been eligible for, but somehow didn't grow into the next batch. So Camcycle is a very difficult organization to get grant funding for. I'm sure any other advocates would know, particularly when you want it for the infrastructure of the organization and the staff. We could get funding for projects, but who is going to run the project? You can't run the project successfully if you don't have computers and you don't have electricity and things like that. And it's so hard to get funding for those things. But Cambridge is a city, it's actually one of the UK's, if not the most unequal city in the UK. But there is also money here that I think a lot of places wouldn't have access to. And I think we need to be honest about that. One of the things that I've found incredibly successful for Camcycle has been match funding campaigns. So if you do have someone who is able to make a larger donation, can you then use that to inspire multiple other smaller donations? The major donors love to see their investment in the organization being grown through other donations, and other people love to see that if I give a bit, we get double. So I would really explore that as a good starting point for many advocacy organizations. But you've got to build that community relationship with your supporters. You've got to keep that conversation going, and you need to make sure that they feel that they are part of that success that you're having as well. So report back.
What would you say were Camcycle's biggest 2 or 3 wins during your years as the CEO?
The Chisholm Trail, of course. So the Chisholm Trail, and I love this because the Chisholm Trail is a campaign that we started before I joined. It had been going for about 20 years, and it got nicknamed the Chisholm Trail after Jim Chisholm, who worked out how we could get this path in. And so it started out as an idea that Jim had. We published it in our magazine, and just consistent campaigning over 20 years. Eventually it got traction, it got in the local plan, then it got funding, and then eventually it got built. And there was a bridge on this trail that is really close to my house. So your first question, if I'd gone beyond my street, I would have ended up on the Chisholm Trail, and there's a bridge there, and that bridge opened the same day that the sale of my house closed. So it feels like my own personal bridge that I cycled to my house. I got to be there for the ribbon cutting. And what is so successful about this isn't just that the campaigning work that we did to get this trail and this bridge in place, but the impact of it is phenomenal. It's not just transport, it's changed the community. It's connected two communities together. It's just become this amazing meeting place. I go out every morning to walk the dog. I see other people. It's helping communities get to the train station now. The leisure journeys have increased phenomenally. The usage of this trail and this bridge is beyond what anyone expected. So I think that getting it in the first place is the success, and showing how well used it is, and therefore justifying further investment, is also a big part. So now we need part 2 of the Chisholm Trail. Let's see. Let's hope that doesn't take another 20 years. So there's that. I think another one is Milton Road. And what made this so successful was, at the start, Camcycle and the cycling advocates were pitted against local residents. And it became something that got really stirred up in the media. Oh, cycling versus the residents, and the trees, and the cyclists want the trees gone, and the residents don't want the cyclists, they want the trees. And it was getting really heated. And we just went, you know what, this is ridiculous, because we live around here, we are the residents, and we like cycling under trees. When did we get framed as the people that don't like trees? So we sat down with the residents and had a meeting, and they're like, we ride bikes, so we don't know why you're trying to be horrible. And we're like, well, we like trees and we don't understand what's going on. And then we worked out, hang on, none of us are saying any of the things that seem to be going on here. Maybe we need to work together. So the residents then found that Camcycle was this amazing resource of technical knowledge, and we worked out designs where we could have bike lanes and trees. And then we went back to the local authority and went, you can't do this. You can't have us all against each other. We're now a huge alliance of local residents groups, cycling advocacy groups, all these people, and we've come up with a better design. And it changed the game. It absolutely changed the game. And now we are cycling in safety in lovely separated lanes down Milton Road with trees. It's not perfect, absolutely, but we got it in. And what I like is how we changed that conversation, and it changed all future schemes that came out through this program and how we needed to be engaged with. And I'd say another success is also then, I would say, the Dutch roundabout. So Cambridge had one of the first Dutch roundabouts in the UK. It's not the first. Again, probably not perfect, but that's the first piece of infrastructure. But what I like about that, again, is Camcycle's role in this was, let's just say, some really good networking connections at the Embassy of the Netherlands, which led to consultants from the Dutch Cycling Embassy coming and doing a program with Cambridgeshire County Council, and the officers there had this idea, and it was able to come to fruition. But I just really like Camcycle played this connecting role in bringing that together, and we now have a Dutch roundabout. Camcycle's successes are very much about just this persistent, consistent, professional, informed, knowledgeable ticking away. And we get it there. And we do this amazing job of community building around these projects.
I love all of that approach. And it sounds like what's really interesting is the things that you're talking about are very specific infrastructure outcomes, that delivery. But your annual review for 2025 includes this big headline that says shaping the vision. And so it's really interesting how you're talking about having a big vision, but then getting things built on the ground. So when you talk about that shaping the vision, what do you mean by that? And what's the best way for an advocacy organisation to achieve that?
Yes, so actually I would say that these 3 achievements that I've mentioned, the work for those started years, decades ago. And so certainly before that new strategy that was launched 25-26. And that new strategy around Shape the Vision has come from things that we've learned from those earlier projects. And so, yes, we get that infrastructure outcome, and Camcycle's strategy is absolutely about you've got to get the stuff built. That's where we put our focus. But to get the stuff built, you need to inspire people. They need to understand why. And that's the vision. And in some ways, also, we now have planning and design guidance in the UK that we didn't have before. So for those in the know with the UK, we've got LTN 1/20, which is all about designing your cycling infrastructure. And then just this week, Active Travel England launched the Rural Design Guide. So we've got really good guidance now that reduces the burden on your cycling advocacy a little bit. So you don't have to do all the drawings and designs, we still do, but you can say, do it like the government told you to do it. It helps there. But you can only get to that point if you've won the argument about having that in the first place. And that's that vision piece. And I think the Chisholm Trail was a great bit because we came up with the idea. We had the vision for this trail, and then we were able to get momentum. But if we just come up and said, here's a technical drawing about a bridge, we wouldn't have won anyone. And I think also what we learned is that the conversation does then need to be about, well, we're going to improve community connections and well-being, and children can get to school, and here are the benefits to the community. That's why we need a bridge, not we need a bridge and then we'll get all of these things. So we learned a lot from that we need to do much more on that vision piece. Now, Cambridgeshire is very complicated from a governance perspective. It would take this whole podcast for me to even explain all the layers of government and the complexity around that. And that means that Camcycle is extremely busy. We may not have a huge population. Our governance is disproportionate to the size of our population. And that's why we need so many people at Camcycle to deal with all the different players in this piece. And we've worked out that we now can get in much, much earlier. We are no longer criticizing what they produce. We are in there as a stakeholder from the early stages saying, here's how we can shape this project. Here's what you need. So this is very much that shape the vision with those decision makers, with the people making the designs, and with the community as well.
I love it. And so you've been with Camcycle for just over a decade, and you've now left Camcycle. Can you talk us through what that's about?
Yeah, I think it's hard to leave because it's almost when you've helped create it and shape it, it's not a normal job. But I do think it's important that leaders know when to go. I think I stayed a bit longer than I should have, but we had a pandemic and all sorts of things. And I needed to make sure that the time was right for me as well. But I think that all leaders have strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to let change happen and let new strengths and new weaknesses come in as well, and you adjust that over time. So there's partly it's time to go, but also for me, it's time to come and spend some time with my family. And I feel like it has to be now if I'm going to come back and start building for that next phase of my life. So I'm coming home.
You're coming back to Perth, your hometown, and what can you tell us about this next chapter in your professional life, the role that you're taking up?
Yes, so I can tell you that I will be working for the West Australian State Government in the Department of Transport and Major Infrastructure. I have a title of Manager Built Environment. So I am still firmly in our wonderful world of active and sustainable transport. I am really looking forward to, let's just say, being in a larger organization where I don't have to be responsible for everything that you do when you are a small charity CEO. So it'll be quite wonderful to have a bit of resource around and to be able to focus more on people and the content of the work rather than all the infrastructure to support the work. As much as I've enjoyed that and the organization building, I would like to have a change. My remit, the coverage of this role is the entire state. So I've gone from a small city to a state the size of Western Australia. Numerous United Kingdoms would fit in WA. Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that I went to the launch of the Rural Design Guidance for England just on a couple of days ago. I thought, this might be helpful for my role. No, rural just means something entirely different in Australia. And I'm really passionate about that. I'm really passionate about making sure that we don't just focus on the urban areas and the cities, and that we really think about our rural connections as well for transport and for leisure also. So I think I get to have a bit more of the leisure and the fun stuff in my work as well. I have to make sure I've got a gravel bike and things like that now, which will be really exciting.
Speaking about leisure, I believe a little birdie might have said that you've been having a bit of leisure time. You're not just jumping from one job to another, a bit of European travel. What might you have seen? I'm sure, as is the case with me when I go on holidays, you never go on holidays. You're taking photos of bike infrastructure and looking at things. Dare to disagree with me on that, Roxanne.
I can't disagree.
Did you see anything in any particular country that really inspired or interested you that you would like to share?
Yes, I did actually pop by Velocity in Rimini. I didn't go to the conference, but I was so close at that point in my travels that I popped down for the bike parade and the party.
As you do, you've got to get your priorities right.
Why not?
I thought about maybe going to a bit of the conference, but it was really hot and there was the beach. So actually, I'm staying just outside of Rimini. I popped into Rimini as well. And the foreshore, the area along the coast there, they've done a huge project to really limit traffic, pedestrianised areas, put bike lanes in, and lots of really lovely planting. This is an area that sneaks into my job, is I really like gardening and landscape design and so on. So to be honest, I've probably got more pictures of plants than bike infrastructure from that visit. But what I loved was the passeggiata in the evening and this Italian culture of you have your dinner and then you go out for the long walk. And there's so many people. Now, of course, Australia doesn't have that kind of density. We're not going to see that many people. But just thinking of the public realm as this community facility and the importance of that. It's not just for transport to get here or there, but making it so it's a place where people can come together and be active, but also enjoy each other's company. So I thought that was really inspiring. I was also there for the Summer Solstice Festival. So there were acrobats and all sorts. I didn't know what was going on, but it was amazing. So I loved that. I took my folding, so I was traveling by camper van. I took my folding bike, I had my dog. What I thought is really interesting, particularly in France, is the importance of connecting those campsites to the villages, the towns, and the city with really good cycling infrastructure. So you can park up your van and especially with the e-bikes now, you see so many people of varying abilities park up their van and they use the bike to go and do all their errands. And I had this lovely routine of popping the dog in the bike basket, taking the long way into the village, getting my baguette, and then cycling back, making sure the dog didn't eat the baguette on the way. But just feeling how that's just so integrated into how they design their towns and villages that I just don't think is that obvious in the UK and probably not Australia either. But we can certainly reduce the traffic going into towns and villages if we have good cycling infrastructure from our parking, camping, living areas. I thought that was great. The quality of cycling infrastructure and the engineering standards in so many places was just so brilliant. I wasn't a fan of the 17% gradients in Slovenia, though. Especially not with a dog in the front of the Brompton basket. And they weren't short rides either. But the scenery was spectacular. I have to admit, it's almost a focus on your cycling infrastructure when there are so many mountains and things to look at. I have to say, I also had a go at downhill mountain biking in the French Alps. My friends took me up on a chairlift and threw me down a mountain, and I have a few scrapes to show for it. And I took up a new form of active travel. I'm sure this will apply in Western Australia. I learned how to windsurf.
Oh, you'll definitely be windsurfing in Perth.
Exactly. I was like, can I windsurf to work? Maybe not, but maybe I could kayak. I thought that was interesting too. Honestly, it's just the prevalence of cycling infrastructure and the interconnectedness of it everywhere. It's not just here's one route you can go on. It's almost everywhere. Patches of Italy, though, were just terrifying and just no footpath at all. I mean, you're driving a camper van. That's scary because you need to make sure that you're very alert in case someone is walking on the road because they have nowhere else to walk. But also for walking, didn't enjoy that. There were good and bad things to learn from.
Sounds like you had a wonderful trip.
Roxanne, I once had a politician tell me that he was surprised that more politicians don't support walking and cycling infrastructure, because there's nothing quite as ego boosting as having the community turn up and get excited when you open a footpath or cycleway. Have you had a similar experience?
As a cycling advocacy organisation, you learn how important it is to have a good pipeline into the local media. And Camcycle was well known for being able to get very high quality photography that could get you on the front page of the newspaper. We had our magazine, really strong social media following as well. Either the opening of a scheme, the start of a scheme, or a high profile campaign that's really getting the community behind it. If you can work with those local politicians and get good coverage, they'll turn up. If you're inviting them to things all the time and then nothing happens of it, they're busy people and they have campaigns to win, they have constituents to impress. But if you can show that you can facilitate that in a transparent and honest way, but you're good at it, they will turn up. And once they've turned up once, and if they get a good reception, they will keep coming. Though that said, I then put that back onto the politicians, is to make sure that if you're going to be cutting a ribbon, that it's because you are making sure there's good quality work. If you cut the ribbon on something and 6 months later it's falling apart, that can be hard to have your name against. As advocacy organisation, we really do our bit to get the profile out there, get the sound bites. We need our police to do good quality infrastructure. But I would say another highlight for us was Camcycle getting mentioned in the House of Commons by our local parliamentarian MP, Daniel Zeitner, was quite impressive. And let me tell you, we made a meme from it. It was fabulous to be mentioned in the House of Commons. We're pretty big for a small campaign, that's for sure.
We're coming to the end of our conversation. Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you would like to share?
Always quite an honest, transparent person. And I do think particularly leaving the organisation, you almost get a bit more freedom. And I think it's easy to celebrate success and what makes for a good advocacy organisation. I'm proud of so much of what I've done, but these are jobs that really can take a toll. And I think we need to be honest about that as well. I have had harassment. I have had a lot of stress. Running a small charity is getting harder and harder. I cannot believe how much harder that became over 10 years with increased scrutiny and pressure and funding challenges on small charities. So I do just want to acknowledge for those people who are out there finding it really hard, I have found it very difficult too. And that is why I needed to have a bit of a career break in between. I needed to make sure I had some rest and some recovery. Feeling ready to go now, I can tell you. But I do just want to make sure that anyone listening to this isn't thinking, oh, that sounds easy, or I wish it could be like that. It's tough, and I know it, and I see it, and I believe you how difficult this can be. And that is why I think I keep going on about community, because we need to be supporting each other. These things can be really, really difficult as well. I don't want to end on that note, but I just want people to feel that they're not alone.
I completely agree with you, Roxanne. I've experienced similar. And I always try to say that when you're working with volunteers in particular, it's really important not to expect them to keep giving more and more of their time. I'm always really pleased when they do and hugely thankful, but I don't expect them to continue to do that, because it's really challenging and people have a lot of things on their plate.
They do. And I cannot believe how much Camcycle's volunteers have given consistently over decades. And I just really want them to have the credit for that, because I could not have achieved what I did without all that work they did and continue to do. And it's hard for them sometimes as well. But the charity sector, because Camcycle is a registered charity, we have to meet so many standards as a charity, and it requires so much from volunteers. It's getting harder and harder. And you don't want to ask too much, but also you have to sometimes to keep running as a charity. And at the size that Camcycle is, you either need to be smaller or you need to be bigger, because your economy of scale is really out of whack when you're about the size we are. And it takes so much from volunteers, and I appreciate them so much. They've been amazing, and I'm so sad to leave them. But yeah, keep going. We appreciate it so much.
Well, Roxanne, England's loss is going to be Australia's gain. And thanks for squeaking.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing you in person. I'm sure in the coming months we will find a way to cross paths. And can I just say to anyone out there, please reach out. I'll be building my new Australian community. So I'll be looking for colleagues, and do find me and we can have a chat about West Australia and how we get more people cycling. Thank you.
Sarah, what were the highlights for you of what Roxanne had to say?
So many. I think having come from working in advocacy and being chair of a national advocacy charity organisation, so much of what she said was so pertinent. It's how do you turn all these eager volunteers who don't necessarily have a lot of time but have a lot of energy and passion into actually achieving built projects on the ground. Like I think she underplayed it a little, how hard that is. I mean, she talked about these 20-year horizons, but I really liked the fact that she was able to give us some very practical tips about how she's applied that, both from growing and building an organisation through to the way that they work with politicians and work with communities and turn them around. All of that just had so many lessons for us.
It's like water wearing down rock often. We're playing in a long game as advocates, and you just need to plug away. The people that can plug away against setback and setback, but just not give up. That is the key, as Winston Churchill famously said, never give up. That was something I took out of it. As always, at the end of our podcast, we talk about what we're doing or what we've read or what's happening in the world. So what's up, Sarah?
Phil, I wanted to talk about the Transformers project initiated by Fiona Campbell with Charlene Bordley and a whole team of researchers at the University of Sydney. It was an 8-week study undertaken in a socio-economically deprived area that is highly car dependent. They provided 42 people, mostly women aged 45 to 65, with subsidised e-bike access, as well as structured training, guided rides, and culturally inclusive support. And the results were just so compelling. They found that 92% of their participants increased their confidence in riding, 59% reduced their car use, 71% that travel became more enjoyable for them, and 3/4 of them said they rode more for everyday transport. So that's a pretty amazing result from just an 8-week study. And the fact that it was also done for such a low cost, there's really no other transport investment that gets that sort of mode shift. And what it showed was that to be most successful, if you are going to be providing e-bike subsidy programs, you need to have supported systems around it, like the guided rides and skills training. And you obviously need to have that safe, connected infrastructure with secure bike parking. But what was really interesting is that they've got a recording that we'll have in the show notes, and you can also read a report that's been published as an evaluation. But the comments by the participants is so revealing. And I'll just pick one quote from Florence, who says, "For shopping and things like that, I'd prefer to use the e-bike because it's easier and more fun to get on the e-bike than take the car for a short trip. It felt just as fast taking the e-bike and simply not trying to have to find parking." So you can hear more of these in the recording and show notes along with that evaluation report.
Sounds like an outstanding project and probably useful worldwide. Sarah, I would like to honour the lives of 2 young active transport planners who were killed in separate incidents just a few weeks apart. Riley O'Neill was a 35-year-old complete streets planner for the Chicago Department of Transportation who was killed while riding his bike home on the 5th of June this year. It was a classic incident that every long-term cyclist has either experienced or is acutely aware of. The driver of a parked car that Riley was about to overtake suddenly flung open his door in front of him. He swerved, but he clipped the door, fell onto the roadway, and was tragically run over by a passing truck. This exact scenario has happened all too often. The driver who doored Riley was operating an uninsured vehicle. They had a suspended driver's license, and they had parked in a space where parking was prohibited. Riley O'Neill had devoted his career to making the city's roads safer for cyclists and pedestrians. His legacy includes a complete upgrade of Chicago's bike parking system, creating what became known as Riley Racks. More recently, he was working on school zone safety. Then just 34 days later, Louisa Gagg, a 36-year-old active transportation planner and prominent cycling advocate in the city of Boston, also died. She was killed by a pickup truck driver while she was riding to work. Louisa started out as an advocate working for the Livable Streets Alliance, and in 2022 joined the City of Boston Transportation Department. The City of Boston is led by the prominent and progressive Mayor, Michelle Wu, and here's part of a clearly heartfelt message that Mayor Wu wrote on her personal Facebook page. I am heartbroken by the passing of Louisa Gagg, a dedicated public servant whose life's work was making our streets, neighbourhoods and public spaces safer and more accessible for everyone to enjoy. I am absolutely devastated by this unfathomable loss for our community and our city. I will miss her terribly. Sarah, I don't want to dwell on morbid topics, but this was very personal for me. I have a love-hate relationship with the USA, having lived there as a teenager while in high school and having unbelievable memories of that time, and then having visited many times since, first as a racing cyclist and later as a publisher, including in the 2000s and 2010s when we published cycling guidebooks and maps for cities across the USA. I've made wonderful friends there in the cycling community, and I love their positive spirit, but I hate the vested interests that lead to the deaths not only of Riley and Louisa, but about 8,000 additional pedestrians and cyclists who die needlessly in the USA every year, a number that has been rising. In fact, it's almost doubled from the low point around 2010. It's even more personal for me because many years ago my mother was killed by a young driver who had disconnected his back brakes so that he could do burnouts. He also breached a range of other rules, which I'm not going to list in full, but it was a long list. The consequences were that he could not stop in time when he needed to, but the end result was devastation for my family and my mother's friends and community. Another result of that crash has been my ongoing work in advocacy, including the creation of this podcast. What other response can any of us have to these tragedies other than to keep fighting every day to make things better for our children and grandchildren?
Phil, thank you so much for sharing that personal story about both your personal impact on you and your family. That must have been so awful to lose your mum in those circumstances. So thank you for sharing that with us and being so open about that on this podcast. And I can see how that would really drive your passion for doing what you do and bringing this podcast to everyone here globally.
No, it's quite all right. And every word I say, we really do have to do everything we've got. Everyone's got different skills, different talents, different resources. Just use whatever's in your hand. You can do something that someone else can't. I don't have your skills, Sarah. I'm not that fortunate, but I've got my own set of skills and experience. Each of us just use what we've got and work as a team. Just help everyone else out that is trying to achieve the same things as you. I'm a great believer in collaborations, building friendships, not making enemies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the big lesson we've got from today's podcast, from listening to Roxanne, about what it takes to establish and grow so phenomenally an advocacy organisation. Because at the end of the day, that's where we can be the most effective, is to be banding together and working with our local communities to make that change happen.
So hopefully you found that encouraging and not discouraging, but I really wanted to honour those two fine young people that were needlessly killed, and hopefully, I'm sure there were huge protests, demonstrations, acts of love, whatever, in those two respective communities. So I'm sure their legacies won't be forgotten and their ideals will live on beyond them. That's all for this month's podcast. Until next time, keep squeaking.